For CBOE Digital broadly, what would spot ETF approval actually mean for you?
I think the spot ETF approval is really bullish for the overall sentiment in the market. We operate a spot market regulated in the U.S. as a money service business and a CFTC-regulated futures market and clearinghouse. And I think seeing that approval really is going to pave the way for pension funds and RIA-based funds to be able to invest assets in a spot Bitcoin ETF where they may not be able to gain that access today in just a native spot Bitcoin token.
How do you see people using derivatives contracts, options, futures in a world where an ETF exists?
With an ETF, now we have a broader ecosystem. So you have more players, institutional players that are used to hedging their risk. And so they lean on derivatives quite heavily to be able to hedge that risk, right? And so as that ecosystem evolves, they're going to lean on those derivatives more and more as a product of being able to hedge that risk. And so I think we'll see that ecosystem on the derivative side grow with the growth in the spot ETF as well.
And when we're thinking about this derivatives activity, this would suggest institutions more so than retail, right? Or how do you see this breaking down?
It's going to be hard to judge what the breakdown is going to be yet because we'll have to wait and see. I think generally we're going to see institutions probably start to lead the way. The associated participants that are involved with a spot Bitcoin ETF are going to want to find ways to access those hedging tools that we just spoke about. And so I think you're going to see them look for those types of markets, those trusted, those highly regulated markets like what CBOE Digital is launching on the 11th to find the access to those tools to hedge that risk. And so I think you'll see, like I said, institutions drive that, but retail will also look for that as well. And I think in crypto, we've seen a huge following in retail in terms of gaining access to derivatives, at least internationally. And so I think we'll see that trend come to the U.S. as well, as again, we see the ecosystem continue to evolve and grow.
We've come pretty far. I remember covering when the futures were approved and the margin requirements on them. And so to think about this type of leverage being able to re-enter the system after, frankly, blow-ups in a number of exchanges, brokerages, how do you see the role of leverage interacting with the crypto community with new products like yours coming out?
Yeah, I think leverage is an important tool, right? Because you need to have capital and you need to be able to efficiently use the capital in the market to put on the type of exposure and gain the risk-weighted kind of exposure that you want. And so trading firms look for leverage to be able to do that. I think the leverage we see in the U.S. is a lot different than sometimes the leverage that you can gain on the international market. And I think that's one key difference. Additionally, here is the governance process and the controls and the oversight that's involved in dealing with margin futures or even options, at least on the U.S. There's a significant amount of governance and oversight regulatory processes that you have to follow in order to change the margin levels and to issue new products under the CFTC's guidance, at least for Bitcoin and ETH. And so I think that there's a big difference there between what you're potentially able to do depending on what regulatory jurisdiction you're in across the globe.
Yeah, and even in the United States, it's worth asking your opinion on the regulatory oversight that we may or may not see here that could change the way these products work. It's, I think, no secret that the CFTC has taken control of the crypto industry, perhaps a little more, how do you say, offensively, rather than defensively than the SEC has. We're alphabet soup here, regulators. So what does that mean here for futures versus spot?
Well, I think in general, futures, we see a clear pathway. So we understand that Bitcoin and ETH futures and options exist today, and institutions are comfortable with the regulatory regime, and they've been trading futures on commodities for over 50 years, right? And so we're able to see that ecosystem grow, and we're seeing a lot of institutions start to move and gain more access to that ecosystem and those products because of their comfort, because they understand the venues like CBOE Digital and others that are operating in them, and they're used to that sort of ecosystem and how it's operated. On the spot market, I think generally what we want to see is clarity. Whether it's an SEC regulated or a CFTC regulated or a new regulatory regime that maybe doesn't exist, from our perspective at CBOE Digital, the clarity is what's most important, not necessarily where.